Hello. I wanted to take a minute to talk about a new functionality added in Vicinity 4.35, which is our June 2021 release. Specifically, it's around uh, further defining the process within a formula. So, for example, we have in the system, of course, we have unit procedures and operations. Unit procedures are machines, and then within machines, we have operations. So in my demo environment, you can see some examples of that. Um, we wanted to be able to give the ability for a user to set, say, the start date of a batch ticket on a machine, let's say this premix machine, and then later in the process, might be done a day to 3 days later. This can happen in a number of scenarios. Breweries do it when they dry hop their fermentation vessel. Bakeries might do it if they make a dough and then par freeze it and then process it further later. Chemical companies do it when chemicals need to sit in a reactor for a while and then do further process down line. Uh, and prior to this release, we really only had a begin date of a batch. And what we've added is the ability to, at any stage, I'm going to pick on this unit procedure. At any stage, we can tell the system that we want you to offset this machine start date, the unit procedure start date, by, let's say, 2 days after the batch starts. And you can define as many of those as you want. The way we did this is through parameters. So let me just open up my parameter setups, and I have already defined in my final mixing unit procedure, I have a couple of parameters already there. I've got a temperature, I want to set the temperature of the vessel, etc. And then I've got a new one that I'm calling offset days. The actual name of the parameter isn't important. It's not the most critical part of this. You can call it anything you want, but rather when you set up that parameter, you can define information about that parameter. So for example, I created a parameter here called offset days, gave it a description. The most important part is it has to be an integer. And then you can say, is a batch start date offset? So what I'm doing is I'm saying that this parameter is going to hold the number of days I want to delay after the batch start date. So for example, in this case, I've added this batch offset to the start, and I've given it a value of 2, which means that if this batch were to start July 1st, this unit procedure would be required for July the 3rd. What you should also know about this is everything within that, in this case, unit procedure and downward, also picks up that date as well, so that for MRP purposes, now all these ingredients are going to be needed start date plus the offset. Now, this is defined in the master formula initially. So when you set up your formula, you're able to say these are the parameters that we want. This is the offset that we need, so that when I go into batch entry and I create a batch using that formula, it will read that parameter value into the batch. Now, many of you may not be aware of some functionality we added a while back, a couple of versions ago, related to batch parameters. So this is the formula. The batch parameters is a new section down in this area added 6 or 9 months ago. And if you want to see it, you can actually go to the procedures, specifically go to that unit procedure, and you're going to find there's that offset. So what's happening is we now have an offset on the final mixing unit procedure for a value of 2. This is, of course, being used by MRP, as I said, because it's a start date offset, and it will delay the requirement of the raw materials to start date plus 2. The other thing that can be done is this value can be used when you go to print a batch ticket. So you can have the start date, but you could also have dates at any stage along the way, saying, I need this done on this date, this done on this date, this done on this date. So it really adds a lot of flexibility to the scheduling part of Vicinity, specifically through batch entry. Now, I showed you an example where it was defined at the unit procedure. know that it could also be defined or alternatively be defined at an operation level. So for example, for brewers, they may have the unit procedure might be a fermenter, and then they add their yeast, etc. But then in another step, they might dry hop. And that's where they could come in and say, actually on the individual line item, the individual chemical, the individual hop, the individual food ingredient, whatever, you could add a parameter here and it would pick up the date or the offset for that one line by itself. There's a lot of flexibility here. Feel free to reach out to us and we're happy to work with you on some use cases on how this might be beneficial to your organization. We look forward to your feedback and hope you enjoy it. Thanks.